live in 2 minutes. Lynn Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
It's a croaky voice today. You can judge the you know when Labor Day's coming when I start sounding like this. I hope it's not too awful, and I'll try not to hack, cough, and burble too much. Hi, how you doing? It is September 3rd, and it's going to be another hot, humid day. Celine and I were just talking about how lucky we are, and how sometimes that sense of living a life that has been truly relatively free of horror. I can't say I've had any horror, and true unbearable kind of sorrows outside the norm. I said I feel guilty sometimes because, I did nothing to deserve it. And then I feel guilty because I'm thinking if you have it, you should embrace it. I should be the person who's living life, savoring every moment, because I've been given this gift to be able to. And, sometimes you can't keep that thought in your head all the time. I think it's about perspective, because we were talking about, I don't know. I'm very aware of a lot of people who are not in my close orbit, but in a secondary, tertiary orbit, who are undergoing such unbearable kind of pain. And you realize that, so many people, that's what their life is in large part. Where I'm heading with this is, where do we, I was, again, Celine and I talking before the show, I said there's just very little to talk about, and she said, except, what'd you say? Bodies washing up on shore. Bodies of 3-year-old boys washing up on shore. And I said, oh, the audience will love that. It'll make their day. And then I was thinking, who are we so blessed to not... So I don't know what to do here today, guys. I just don't know what to do. The story, which has been, and I've alluded to it, and I've often said, I can't bear to even witness it. And I'm thinking I'm doing you a favor by not talking about it. But let's get real. It ain't going away. And what we're talking about are human beings. We've heard the studies that it's very hard for us to feel connected when something very large is happening to a lot of people, none of whom we personally know. And that the only way there is to relate is through maybe one person's story. There must be so many amazing people in these hordes, which is a very negative word, in these hordes of migrants. I have often said I think one of the reasons the United States is such a powerful nation and so different in some very singular ways is clearly by virtue of the fact, not just of our foundational documents, but by the fact that unlike almost every other nation, we are a polyglot. We are made up of all kinds of people who came in. And from all of that stew of humanity, we made ourselves into a nation. And I have said, think of who those people would have been. I mean, they are our ancestors. Maybe your parents, maybe your grandparents, maybe you go back to great, 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 great. It doesn't matter. Whoever that person is who picked up and left where they were and where they had maybe been for ever, left a language they knew, left their families, left everything for a shot. Nothing guaranteed, for a shot at a better life. That the only people who would do that, who would stuff some belongings into a suitcase, kiss their family goodbye, never knowing if they'd ever see them again, and take off into an unknown, those people must be extraordinary people. They must be braver than most. They must, I think, be more hopeful than most. They must be resilient. They must be a lot of strong, and they must be willing to take risk. These are the kind of people that any nation should want. And I think one of the reasons that, I'll say it again, that we are such a great nation is so many of those who came here had that kind of a personality profile. So imagine these boatloads, these train loads, these truckloads, these people on foot carrying everything that they could take with them, which is often nothing more than like a backpack, taking their children, babies, and starting off into the unknown. The last time I talked about this, I focused on what they were leaving. I focused on How desperate would you have to be? But there are a lot of other people back in Syria and Libya and Eritrea and Afghanistan and these other nations that they are streaming out of who are suffering under that same condition, but who don't, for whatever reason, make a run for it, for something better. And so when you see the pictures of these people, stateless now, terrified, hungry, thirsty, their children with them, you see the welcome that they are receiving on their way. And you see and are part of the indifference that mostly accompanies their struggle. This is not a feel-good moment. So, I want to say that Europe is the one being tested right now, because that's where they're coming. What if by virtue of our geography, we are not seeing this personally? We're seeing it over our southern border with Guatemalans and others fleeing the same kind of thing. The gangs, the unbearable poverty, looking for a chance. And you see how we have greeted them. So I am going to assume that if we were to be a European country, we would not necessarily be handling ourselves any better than we see most of the European countries doing. I realize these are huge problems for any country to all of a sudden be asked to take in millions of people. Germany has agreed at this point to take 800,000. I don't know of any other European nation who has done anything quite that large. Germany, of course, was the country from which the last huge tide of human refugees that Europe witnessed were leaving, were running for their lives from. So Germany and its particular history, I think, makes them, if only out of shame, not want to be on the wrong side of history yet again. That's my guess. So what do we do? I'm sure there are things that Americans could do in terms of providing relief for the refugees as they make their way. But you see how Hungary, for instance, and Hungary is a right-wing, nasty government. I mean, nasty. And so look at how, even with children, look at how they are, well, if you are looking. So here's part of the problem. Europe is really, given the Greece bailout and their financial difficulties and the rise of neo-fascist and other right-wing parties, Europe is reeling a bit. And this, of course, is making it worse. But the way Europe functions and works is European countries allow, and the EU, the consolidation of those countries, allow very, very few legal avenues for desperate people to come to them. So in that regard, Europe helps create this kind of catastrophe as well. Because there's next to no legal ways, Europeans are essentially creating the environment that then creates these human smuggling operations, which end with 70 men, women, and children suffocating in trucks, and hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds crammed into boats with maybe a bottle of water and a tin of biscuits and no flotation devices, and most cannot swim, and they're off on some rickety raft for a 300-mile trip over a huge body of water, and people are making lots of money putting those people in jeopardy. So the way the European Union works in terms of who gets in, they have something called a Regulation Act that was passed in the 90s. And the way it works is if a refugee gets a toehold, sets down in a European country, it is that country that they must apply for asylum in. The first country they reach is the country that's got to deal with them. Well, we saw what happened with that, because the first countries that were being reached were Greece and Italy. That's with all these people in their boats. Greece, as we know, can barely feed its own at this point. And yet the Greeks took these people in. The Italians are not one of the more financially secure nations of Europe. And yet they have, for a long, long time, almost single-handedly sent ships out into the Mediterranean looking for these refugees in these rickety rafts and rescuing them. Quite clearly, this is to the credit, the great credit of Italy and Greece. But Europe is made up of many nations. And very few have comported themselves in a way that would get them, pat on the back from the Pope, let's say. Hungary being an example of, the ugliness, the xenophobic, anti-immigrant ugliness. Hungary, Donald Trump. But this is literally a tsunami of humanity. A huge part Syrians running from a horror. Their country is being destroyed. Almost anybody in it, I was lucky to be alive, as far as I can tell. So families who pick up and make this run, I don't know that they have much choice. I asked the question the other day. It's a biblical question, right? Genesis, right? Am I my brother's keeper? So that must be a pretty basic question if it made it into the first chapter. Am I my brother's keeper? I don't know what is the answer? I would think it's yes. I would think it's yes. Right. My brother's keeper. And yet it is a rarity to see humans providing care to strangers. And yet I am sure every religion mandates it. That's my guess. Every religion, more than like decrying homosexuality, all the negatives that so many true believers glom onto. The hardest thing that religion requires of us is to do good, is to be good, is to take in the stranger, is to be your brother's keeper. And I look at us now, I look at Europe especially. Europe, which has seen so much horror, which they produced. They produced. Europeans are pretty damn good at avoiding helping their neighbor. I give you World War II. Oh yeah, there are many who helped. But the vast majority don't. I don't think we're any better. We wouldn't do any better. Here they're being tested again in living memory of the last time around. When how many million died? We know 6 million Jews. But good God, there were a lot more than Jews. And here are the Europeans, the ugly face of the Hungarians. France sitting on its hands. Cameron and the English thanking God that they're an island. Iceland offered to take 50 people. This is good. And ladies and gentlemen, America. I believe we've taken in, where did I see somewhere that we had taken in some 8,000? But Germany, as I said, is pledged to absorb 800,000. I think we could do better, don't you? And given the fact that the horror in Syria and all over the world and in the Middle East, it's not like our hands are clean. Our policies uprooted, caused wars, which then created ISIS and all these other lunatics, or certainly gave them fertile ground in which to grow. And any American who would say, we aren't even taking care of our own, how can we take care of these people? I hear you, but we can take care of our own. We're just refusing to. I don't know. I don't watch generally. I mean, it's rare that I watch television news at all, network or local now, so I haven't seen what they're doing with this, but I would imagine, knowing what network news has become, that they're not, doing much with it. So, I'm just saying. I don't know. No trophies for us. No gold stars. Each and every one of us. But they're so far away. What am I supposed to do? I don't know. But you know what? Think about it. If there's money you can give to whatever agency is helping these people in these various countries, give some money. That's the easiest thing. I don't know. As I speak, there are human beings like us on these smashed into these rafts. Have you seen a what do you call that when you're looking down on something? That kind of bird's eye view. I saw a bird's eye view of one of these rafts taken from a helicopter or something. Beyond belief. Beyond belief. These people must be wondrous. And yet they're spoken of and thought of in terms of like locusts or something, some kind of a plague, a danger. When what they are is human beings in need of a helping hand. And the people who are being asked to give that are not realizing what we Americans know, although many of us have forgotten, that you will be repaid many times over by taking in such intrepid and fearless human beings. All right, well, that's all. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Can we take a quick little PSA-ish break just to give my voice a rest? Thank you.
Berg Bargains is your best bet for great deals. Log on today for great deals from the Saga, Round Quarter Cantina, Jurgles, and the Wave Pools at Boys Park, Settlers Cabin, and South Park. Pittsburgh's best bargains, bergbargains.com. Check out the CPED classifieds for the top places to work in the Berg. Aerotech, located in RIDC Park in O'Hara Township, is looking for CNC machinists and skilled assemblers. They are offering excellent pay and benefits packages, including profit-sharing opportunities and a retirement program. Go to aerotech.com for more information or call 412-967-6800. A dynamic opportunity in advanced automation and robotics is waiting for you at aerotech.com.
You're listening to Lynn Cullen live at pghcitypaper.com. Once again, here's Lynn Cullen.
Okay. Good news, I guess. Speaking of a bird's eye view, they've done a using satellite imagery. They've counted how many trees there are in the world. Jeez. And estimates that were made before were not as, I guess, thorough or comprehensive or whatever as this census of the trees of the world. And it is decided now that there are, who's counting? Someone's counting. There are just over 3 trillion trees. And that is a number that is way, way, way over what the predictions had been in the past. In the past, the last major prediction was that we thought there might be around 400 billion trees. So this is, wow, that's like many, Celine and I aren't good at math, but that's we've multiplied that a gazillion times. Not quite. 3 trillion trees. However, before we get too happy about that, those are the survivors. Those are if you want to look at it in the negative. Those 3 trillion are the survivors of us. Because the assumption is that humans, be they deforesting, is it trading? Deforestation. There wouldn't be an R. Humans, whether they're deforesting to create land for agriculture, or because they...
It's deforesting.
Did I say deforesting?
You said deforestating, but I think it's deforesting.
But it's deforestation.
I'm going to look it up now.
Cutting down trees, okay? People, Americans and others, cutting down trees. Not just Americans, it's global. Cutting down trees so that they can grow crops, or so they can build houses, or so they can have heat, or so they can, you name it. We've pretty much done it. We have, of course, had drastically reduced. Did you come up with a word?
Deforested, deforesting, deforests.
Deforestation. Whatever, okay. They figure, anyway, that we have managed to cut down more than 15 billion trees every year. I say if you cut one down, you plant one. Definitely. Every time I see a tree being cut down, it kills me. It like cuts me to the quick. And I have to take a tree down. It doesn't have long to live anyway, and it's a danger, but it just breaks my heart. That tree's probably been there. It's so huge. I bet that tree has been there for hundreds of years. Oh, well. So anyway, research, they figure the ratio of trees to people in the world is 422 trees to each person. Wow. And also they're saying that what you need to know is, even though we got all these trees, and that sounds like such a huge number, they assume that the number of trees on this earth has fallen by almost half since we humans came on the scene. So, did you ever, I don't know why, my mind was wandering yesterday. And I guess this is the same thing where I was thinking about what a lucky existence I have lived, even though I did nothing to deserve it. And I was thinking about my life, and I went back to my beginnings, and I started thinking about certain classmates of mine. Because I was thinking, I grew up as very much a sort of minority person in an all-white city. Green Bay had one black family. They lived down by the railroad tracks. That was it. And it was an all-white community. I guess there's some Native Americans, a few, and they lived on reservations. And in fact, the country club that my parents belonged to was called Oneida, which is after the Oneida Indians. And those Oneida Indians in this fancy country club for Green Bay, fancy country club, they caddied. And I remember being aware of that and finding it incredibly unjust. But so I was, Jews were the other in my reality. Almost everyone was Catholic, except for a few Protestants thrown in here and there. Everybody was white. And then there were these handful of Jews. So I started thinking, I mean, the fact that I can name every Jew my age in Green Bay, Wisconsin, all through my life. There was and we had a big class, I guess because we were the baby boomers. There were about, well, it shifted every once in a while. There were never more than 11. And sometimes as low as 8 or 9. People moved, people came in. But so I could name them, thinking of them. And then I just started thinking, because I actually came up with some names that I hadn't thought about ever. And just thinking about each one of those stories. Lives are fascinating. So out of that little population, and the Jews sort of were marked. We were marked by we were marked in lots of ways. We were marked always by teachers at Christmas. I remember specifically, have I told you this story? Mrs. DeWitt, who had this, dyed black, horrible, dyed blacker than anything that it's not a natural black. Dyed black hair. And when she would turn to the blackboard, you would see this like slight bald spot in the back. And that freaked me out because I didn't think women could get bald. And there she was, Mrs. DeWitt. I can't tell you how many teachers said, Lynn, would you like to stand up and tell the class about your Christmas? And I mean, what do I have to do? Start up and saying, well, we don't have a Christmas. A holiday that we have around this time is Hanukkah. So every little Jewish kid had to sort of navigate this crap. And we had to navigate things like this. Mrs. DeWitt, let me get back to her. She once was furious with the class. People weren't doing their work. Nobody was, I don't know. She was pissed, I remember. This is 3rd grade. This is 2nd grade. I'm sitting in the classroom with 2 other Jews, Michael Plaus and Judy Cahodas. And Mrs. DeWitt is on a tear. And then she does it. She says to the class of about 35 kids, I just don't know why the rest of you can't be as studious, as well-behaved, and as such good students or something as my Jewish students. That's what she did. She separated us out from the pack for praise while putting down every other kid. Now, this was bullshit. Because we were not the only. She just won. And I remember looking at Michael Plaus. The 2 of us, our eyes met. We're 2nd graders. Michael Plaus and I, and he especially was looking like sick. Because he's thinking, I'm going to get beat up. And I'm thinking the same thing. But so I was thinking of those kids. And what happened to them? One, a daughter of Holocaust survivors, who became very wealthy because he owned a meat packing plant, her father. Packerland Packing. And you would see all these cattle in the lots. It never occurred to me what was going on in there. Unbelievable. Oy. Anyway, she went to work for him, his daughter, Betty, who was my age. Betty went to work with him. And when she was like 24, 25, I think, she drove home with her dad from Packerland Packing. They're in the driveway. They get out of their car, and another car pulls up. FBI. And they tell her dad, you're under arrest for, I think, wiretapping. I don't know what. He was up to some no good. He drops dead on the spot. Heart attack. Drops dead on the spot. Betty takes the fall. I was thinking of these kids. My mother was reading the Wall Street Journal the other day, and she said, did you see that article about these idiots that don't vaccinate their children in California? And I said, well, I've been seeing lots of them. She said, there's one in the Wall Street Journal today, and there's this pediatrician there who's been testifying before the legislature and saying, that vaccinations are not necessarily good. And he has all these clients, like Jim Carrey is like his client. Pediatrician to the stars. There he was quoted, Dr. J. Gordon. My mom said, do you suppose that's Jay Gordon? I said, yeah. Well, since I saw him at the first high school reunion, yes, because he was a pediatrician in Hollywood. So you mean to say that Jay Gordon, one of the other little Jews, is doing that? He was smart. Oh, is he smart? And he and I used to talk on the phone for hours and hours and hours and hours because, well, we both had pretty good heads and were a little different. And look what he's up to. I'm thinking, and I'm sure you can all do this too, take your little class, take your little clique, follow people throughout their lives and see what has happened. Not one of the Jews that were my age in Green Bay are there because you got out. Because it was hard. Because when I got a job in the chorus of the Music Man one summer at St. Norbert College, this beautiful girl who was playing, not the lead, but the leading girl. Beautiful blonde. God, was she gorgeous. I was maybe about 14. We were backstage one day, and she said, something came up, and she said, "You're a Jew?" And I said, because by the age of 14, man, been here, done that, I said, yeah. And then she said something to me that so stunned me. She said, with no malice at all, just with wonder. Here was a Jew standing in front of her. She said, "Can I feel your horns?" And do you know, I had never, I said, but my, what? I remember it's just sort of my voice. I remember saying, my horn, I don't have any horns. I had never heard that. That some people thought Jews have horns. I let her feel my head. I said, no. Now, I didn't take that as anything other than, that's ignorance. I didn't take exception, but I was freaked because I'd never heard it. I had to run home and say, Mom, why would somebody ask me if I had horns? And then I was told, well, yeah, and when, if you're ever in Rome, go look at Michelangelo, is it his or Da Vinci's, statue of Moses. It's glorious. But Moses has horns. Yeah. I don't know. Sorry. Can you tell I didn't have anything to talk about? So, I just think it's so bizarre where we come from and the things that make us make us who we are. The experiences. The only truly hurtful thing that ever happened to me being the other in Green Bay was walking home from school one day, walking up Alloway Avenue with my friend, Pat. And she said, with such anguish in her voice, I remember exactly where we were standing. I can go stand right there, right in front of the Neufeld's house, right there. She said, why did you kill him? And I said, kill who? Kill who? Why did you kill Jesus? And I said, I didn't. I remember saying, I didn't kill him. My mother says the Jews killed Jesus. And she says, I can't play at your house anymore. Good Friday. We went right home on Good Fridays. My mother kept us in on Good Fridays. Because all the good Catholics, and at the time, they were still being taught that Jews were Christ killers. And that's the... This is a totally different way to grow up as a Jew than if you're a Jew in Pittsburgh, growing up in Pittsburgh. It's total different reality. When I heard that the schools closed here for Jewish holidays of Rosh Hashanah, I couldn't believe it. Because what happened to Jews in Green Bay is you just had to miss school. It went on without you. And because of the calendar, often the first day of school ended up being one of those Jewish holidays. It was very traumatic to miss them. People's environment as children informs who they become. My, I think, sense of being able to understand the other, the marginalized, is totally because I did, as a child, feel I was the other. Now, this didn't result in bloodshed. It wasn't like being a black man in America. But when you are out of the mainstream, your reality is different. It's different. And that's why I think it's just amazing to me how, but I guess maybe it shouldn't be. If you are white, if you are Christian, if you are straight, if you are male, and you are still able to be empathetic and understand that your reality is not then I think that's pretty remarkable. I do. All right. I don't know where. It's because I was thinking of Siggy dropping dead in the driveway and then Betty taking the fall. She went to jail. I used to go to her house and sleep over there. She used to scare me. She would say things in the dark like, "Do you ever see ghosts?" And I would think, I want to go home. I want to go home. She was eventually pardoned by the governor. Hey, speaking of that, speaking of pardon, did you happen to see the editorial that the Post-Gazette ran some time ago now? Have a call? Hello?
Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Where to start? Okay, so anyway, I think I truly believe that anybody that views humans as solely unique individuals, each in themselves, has the same observation that you just made. No matter what race, what culture, what situation they're from, if they view themselves as an individual and don't participate as much in groupthink as someone that doesn't give the reflection on themselves, the time to reflect on themselves, you gain the perspective that you're talking about. Does that make sense to you?
Okay. Yes. You're saying, well, I think if you're a thoughtful person.
Exactly.
But I don't think many of us are, especially now, because, first of all, people, and I'm thinking younger and younger, nobody sits quietly anymore.
No, you're absolutely correct. And, you can almost describe it, and I will go out on a limb, although it's a bit of hyperbole. Our country is almost divided in half by those groups of people, to some extent.
Maybe.
The right and the left. The left thinks in terms of the group, the right thinks in terms of the individual, and it's almost almost a flip of it, because in the left, it's kind of odd this way. The left's group treats people liberally as individuals, and the right's individual treats people selfishly, as an individual, you're selfish, as opposed to treating other people as individuals that are no different from you, have the same. But the reason I get to this is because, I think I agree with you, but I'm a middle-aged white man who grew up going to 12 years of Catholic school in a mostly middle-class area, and I understand and I accept the things that have gone on in our country that are bad, and I accept the results of those things. Whatever you may pick, I don't have a Pollyanna view of America the way some do that would come from my same background. So how do you explain that? And then the only way I can do that is to say that I was fortunate enough to kind of be the
odd man out?
Yeah, to have, for whatever reason, I have a perspective that always kind of, I wasn't in the whatever.
You just
I'm
were,
not sure.
Yeah. Well, that's probably, you're answering your own question, probably. Some of us are not comfortable in the group. I know I'm not, never have been. But doesn't that make me that makes me an individual, which is...
Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, I think that's...
But that's, you're saying
anybody can be...
But you're saying Republicans are the ones who hold up the individual.
Well, in a selfish way, though, it's not true. It's because they consider themselves a unique individual who, but when they look at everybody else, they just group people. You're black, you're a liberal, you're whatever.
But you know what? Okay, but you know what I was thinking is, as you talked about growing up in 12 years of Catholic school and mostly middle class and yada yada yada. I think that parents do their kids a disservice when they do what so many do, which is as soon as they have kids, run out to the suburbs where they will be ensuring that their children grow up in way too monolithic reality, as opposed to being shown all kinds of difference and different
there's
people.
No doubt that you're isolated.
So that's my thing against parochial schools, private schools. I'm sure they're good and offering, it's a whole different life experience, but for the good old public schools, they're everybody mixed. You had rich kids and poor kids and black kids and white kids and Jews and thises and that's. And that's how you learn about the world. And we have totally messed up that.
Sure. Hey, and here's one other thing. It's funny that you mentioned Carrie and the whole non-vaccination kind of cult of groupthink, and just this whole conversation. You mentioning Oneida.
Uh-huh.
Do you know the Oneida story?
Well, they started in New York, didn't they? They were in upstate.
Well, and so I'm assuming that was a migration, a forced migration to Wisconsin.
Yes.
But how about the Oneida community that made the flatware in New York?
That's right. There you
go.
They
were at the kind of polyamorous free love cult.
Oh, really? No,
story?
I guess I don't.
It's an incredible story.
Huh.
Look it up. I won't take any more time and tell the story, but it's a funny story because the silverware comes from a group of people who decided free love was the way to go in the late or the mid 19th century.
Wow.
Check it out.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Well, the good news about the Oneida Nation in my old hometown is that eventually that became a very wealthy tribe because they were given the right to build a casino. And that casino remade that nation. The reservation now is not an appalling place where their nation, where they live, their land, is not. And God. But it's not like I think also our parents have a lot to do with helping us as children become a certain way. Whether I know my father it was just amazing, just always preaching, talking about people and how we were our brother's keeper, how the most important thing you could do was, he would say family and your community. You have got to be attached to and give to your community. I grew up with that being hammered into my head. So I got lucky in that way, too. Some kids grow up with listening to their parents engage in racist talk at the dinner table. I never got that. That's how you learn, right? It's your parents' conversation and what you hear. So I end where I started. I am lucky, and I'm aware of it, and I feel like I'm not. I know I'm not deserving, but I feel like now that if I know all that, then I need to be better. And I need to appreciate life. And I need to not be, my nature is to be sort of a melancholy, depressive person. And I'm thinking, how do you give a melancholy, depressed person this great life? So I, in my last act, am going to become happy. I am going to be so engaged and happy in this world because it's all we got. Think about those poor people and don't think of them as just refugees. Think of them as human beings and do something. I don't care if it's just thinking about them, but do something. All right, sorry about today's show. I don't know what the hell that was, but it was okay. It's all right. Took a little vacay. I just want to say to the Bucks, what the fuck are you doing? They're doing exactly what they always do. They're losing to these bottom-feeding teams. God dang it. Break my heart. Ruin my night. Goodbye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.